Ahoy, mateys! Welcome to Podcasts of the Caribbean, a podcast covering the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, from the theme parks to the movies and everything in between. My name is Justin Helmer, and I will be your host on this voyage through the Caribbean. It'd be too late to alter course now, mateys. Hello and welcome back to Podcasts of the Caribbean. This is a very exciting episode because this is episode 40. We have reached 40 episodes, which is an awesome milestone, and I never thought I'd ever make it this far, but it's thanks to all of you and all of your amazing support and generosity for listening to the podcast and rating and reviewing and everything. Thank you so much. Can't believe we've gotten this far. And we're also coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the podcast on November 4th. And to celebrate that, I have a very special announcement. And if you follow the podcast on social media, you already know what this announcement is. But Podcast of the Caribbean merchandise is now available, which is very exciting. I've wanted to do this for a very long time. Honestly, ever since I started the podcast, I wanted to have merch for it. So this is very exciting. I've set up a TeePublic store, and you can go check it out. Maybe buy some merch for yourself. I'm wearing one of the shirts right now as I'm recording this podcast episode, and it is very nice, great quality, exceeded my expectations on how it would come out. So I'm very excited to make this announcement. If you are so inclined to buy a piece of merchandise, like a shirt, a hoodie, a sticker, or whatever, they have a bunch of things up for sale that you can go check out, maybe buy something. And if you're listening to this episode right now, the day it releases, there actually is a site-wide sale going on TeePublic, so you can get some of this merch for cheaper. So head over there if you're listening to this, whenever you're listening to this, honestly, but if you're listening to it right as it comes out, there should be a sale going on, so you can go check out, maybe grab some merch for yourself at a discounted price. There are a few designs up right now, but I do have some more in the works. There is obviously, the general podcast merch, but there is some more general Pirates of the Caribbean themed stuff because I want to kind of make the merchandise that I always kind of wanted to see that Disney never really ended up making. So maybe some cool stuff will end up coming from this, but very exciting announcement. Yeah, so if you want to check out the merch store, you can head over to the link that'll be in the description of this episode. It'll probably be in the description of the podcast itself. It'll probably also, it's also on social media if you want to check over there. It's up there. Go check it out. Very, very exciting. If you are so inclined to buy something, thank you. Thank you so much. It's only because of all the support you guys have given me over these past 2 years that we're finally kind of reaching a point like this where I can kind of start branching out. So it's awesome. I'm very excited about it, and I hope you guys are excited about it too. So with that, let's move on to the content of today's episode. So in this episode, we are covering the 8th book in the Young Jack Sparrow series, which is called The Timekeeper. And if you listen to the end of the last episode, which we were covering the City of Gold, you know that one of the most iconic Pirates of the Caribbean characters showed up at the end of that book. And that character is, of course, none other than Davy Jones himself. So this book is very exciting as it is the start of a new story arc, but it also is the first meeting of Jack Sparrow and Davy Jones. And if you remember from last time, Jack is left with only one crew member aboard the Barnacle, and that crew member, to his dismay, is of course Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III. Everyone else ended up boarding the Fleur de la Morte, which is Arabella's mother's ship, and sailed off to accomplish their own goals and stuff. So at the end of the last book, the Flying Dutchman appears next to the Barnacle, and Davy Jones comes on deck and demands that Jack and Fitzy give him the pocket watch. And the pocket watch in question is the watch Fitzy's sister gave to him, and he only recently found it in New Orleans in the last book in a pawn shop. So let's find out what Davy Jones is up to, and without further ado, let's dive into The Timekeeper. So the book picks up immediately after the last book ended, and it also begins with a good little explanation of Davy Jones and literally like everything he has in his power, in his toolbox. So let's go right into the book and see what happens. So the book begins and says, Jack Sparrow thought he had seen it all. Mermaids, cursed pirates, swords that could be used to resurrect conquistadors, women who turned into snakes, amulets that turned objects into precious metal. These were all things Jack had become familiar with since he first set sail from the pirate town of Tortuga. From there, he had set off for freedom and adventure aboard the fishing boat he thought of as ship, the Barnacle. But what now stood not 12 feet from Jack was unlike anything the young sailor had ever encountered, because standing not 12 feet away from Jack was the most feared, treacherous, terrible monster on the seven seas, the cursed captain of the Flying Dutchman, Davy Jones. Legend had it that Jones was once an ordinary man. Then he was charged with the task of ferrying the souls of sailors who perished at sea to the next world, an honorable duty. But something went terribly wrong. Jones was deserted by the woman he loved, and the grief that followed was unbearable. He tore his still beating heart from his body and locked it away in a chest, along with precious mementos of his lost love. Soon his body began to transform into something more suited to his now heartless state. His face became monstrous, with tentacles dangling from his cheeks, and the rear of his skull grew to resemble the pulsing body of a large octopus. His hands were replaced by a huge eel-like tentacle and a monstrous claw. His ship, the majestic Flying Dutchman, was also transformed. The entire vessel became covered in an oceanic crust. Barnacles, sea slime, and coral covered the corroded deck. The ship became laden with the bodies of dead sailors, and they began to comprise its hull. The Dutchman's sails caught wind better than any ship on the seas, and she had the uncanny ability to sail underwater, emerging as if from nowhere alongside an unsuspecting vessel. Worst of all, the Dutchman no longer brought the souls to a final resting place as was her original charge. With her unnatural speed and crew, Jones now used the ship to enslave sailors. When a seaman met his end, Jones would appear, telling him he could either die or live forever by giving his soul over to Jones. If the sailor chose the latter, then he would become a member of the crew. Like their captain, the Dutchman's crew had mutated from human to beast. Ultimately, the sailors became a part of the Dutchman itself, blending into the very wood of the masts, the deck, and the broadsides, losing all humanity. And if a sailor chose death over service, the outcome was no less painful. Jones was master of a realm called Davy Jones' Locker, a nightmarish place where the souls of sailors suffered for all eternity. He had sent many sailors there, and the legends all claimed that no one had ever returned. As if the ship, the crew, the locker, and the disembodied beating heart were not bad enough, Jones also had a pet called the Kraken. This giant, squid-like leviathan was capable of terrible acts of destruction, had the foulest breath known to man, and had helped send countless sailors to the locker. All these terrible legends, awful tales, horrifying anecdotes, and yet Jack Sparrow still found it within himself to laugh. In truth, it did seem quite ridiculous that the horrible, terrible, awful Davy Jones had just landed on board the Barnacle looking for, of all things, a pocket watch. "Do not toy with me, Sparrow," Jones snarled. "Hand over the watch." "Pardon me, Mr. Jones. Mind if I call you Davy? Thank you kindly." "What in the seven seas could you possibly want this piece of pawn-shop trash for?" Jack asked, dangling the timepiece that belonged to his only crew member, the aristocrat Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III. Standing close by, Fitzwilliam himself let out a sigh. He had only very recently recovered the watch, which had been given to him by his sister and was stolen from him by a thief months ago. Though he knew all the stories of Jones and was therefore thoroughly terrified, Fitzwilliam set his square jaw and worked hard to steady his legs and keep a cool demeanor. "Trash?" Jones said. "The only trash I see here are two little boys lost at sea, and a pathetic excuse for a seaworthy vessel." "Hold it there, mate," Jack said defensively. "This is my pathetic excuse for a seaworthy vessel, and you're standing aboard it, so you might want to show it, and me, her captain, some respect." Jones wrinkled his slimy brow and snout and leaned toward Jack and Fitzwilliam. A tentacle slithered toward Jack, who recoiled in disgust. The tentacle reached out to Jack as if it were a finger, rested under his chin, and lifted his head threateningly toward the Dutchman's captain, who towered above Jack. "Listen here. I'm in no mood for games, boy," Jones said. "Turn over the Timekeeper, or I will summon the Kraken." "Bring over the beastie," Jack said bravely. "I've heard his terrible breath could kill a man, but it can't be much worse than yours, mate." Davy Jones threateningly lifted up his staff. "Do you want to know how I know that I know you won't summon said beastie?" Jack asked. "Because if you do, down goes the wee barnacle, down goes Jack and Fitzy over here, and down goes this little timepiece everyone seems to have their knickers in a knot over." "Fool," Davy Jones said. "I will enjoy tearing you apart with my bare hands." "You call those hands?" Jack asked, eyeing Jones' claw and tentacle. "I guess it's all a matter of semantics. Anyway, I still don't know what you could ever want with this watch, Davy J. But if it's a fight you like," Jack said, dangling the watch over the side of the barnacle, coolly threatening to drop it. Fitzwilliam and Jones yelled, "No!" while simultaneously lunging for the watch, which Jack neatly pulled out of harm's way. Harm, in this case, being the slimy mad captain and the aristocratic know-it-all. Turning, Fitzwilliam drew his sword and began to slash away at Jones, determined to be rid of the competition. Jones, however, managed to evade every one of the expert swordsman's swipes. Jack casually hoisted himself up onto the side of the barnacle and watched as the two rather odd opponents dueled for a pocket watch. Jack smirked at the ridiculousness of the situation, and then the smirk suddenly vanished as he felt something whip around his neck. It was Davy Jones' tentacled arm, and it was quickly tightening his grip. Jack choked and gasped, attempting to speak, but he couldn't force out any air. "Give me the watch, now," Jones said. Jack was turning a pale shade of blue under Jones' tight grip. As Jack lifted up his hand, Jones grabbed the watch, angrily gripping the chain with one of the tentacles of his beard. With no further use for Jack, Jones released him. Jack fell to the deck and gasped for air. Fitzwilliam, who was not willing to lose his precious watch, his last memento of his departed sister, once again lunged at Jones. He quickly severed the tentacle that held the watch, causing Jones to wail in agony. The timepiece fell to the deck, landing near Jack, who reached out his hand and recovered it. "I think you've made him quite angry, Fitzy," Jack wheezed, still having difficulty talking. "What would ever make you think that?" Fitzwilliam asked Jack, eyeing Jones' slashed tentacle, which gushed with a bluish fluid. "What is so bloody special about this rusty old thing anyway?" Jack asked, clearly frustrated that everyone seemed to know something about this watch that still eluded him. Flipping the top of the timepiece open, Jack accidentally lifted the crown, the knob used to wind the watch and adjust the time, and instantly the whole commotion aboard the barnacle quieted. In fact, everything, for as far as Jack's eyes could see, was completely and utterly still. So Jack now finds himself in another strange and unexplainable circumstance, as he realizes everything is now completely still. There's no sound and there's no movement at all. And only he is able to move around. And Jack realizes it is because of the pocket watch. So he begins to wonder about all the things he could do with time stopped, but he quickly realizes that there's really no fun in time not moving. So Jack moves away from Fitzy and Davy Jones, and he heads over to the other side of the barnacle before he pushes the crown of the watch back down. And immediately after he does this, all the sound and movement that the world had been devoid of comes crashing back, and Jack almost falls over from the shock. And Fitzy and Jones notice that Jack has essentially just teleported to the other side of the ship, since for them, time had been normal, and Jack literally just, moved around the ship like lightning. But obviously Davy Jones is still very angry, and he rushes over to Jack, but Jack lifts the crown of the watch again, and time stops. So with all this time on his hands, get it? Jack goes below decks and looks for the small skiff that he's been keeping down there. But he has trouble finding it with all the clutter in the way, along with all the treasure the crew had found back on Isla Escalatica in the first book. And there's also a bunch of glass jars that Jack bought in Antigua for some strange reason, and spare clothes for the rest of the Barnacle's crew, who of course have gone their separate ways. But Jack finally finds the skiff, but he notices something odd about it. It's actually not a skiff at all, but a curved slab of wood with faces of what Jack presumed were the heathen gods carved into it. So he realizes this is some kind of totem. And he also mentions here the last time he saw one of these was when he was off the coast of Rhode Island, which is kind of interesting. But he's still confused with how this ended up on the Barnacle and why this was here and not the skiff. But he decides to use the totem anyway, so he carries it up onto the main deck, And then he goes over to Fitzy, who of course is still frozen from time being stopped, and Jack pushes him over, and Fitzy crashes to the deck like a statue. Then he ties Fitzy to the totem, and he tries to push it off the side of the ship into the water, but since he's having trouble, he goes over to Davy Jones and takes his staff to help push the totem and Fitzy overboard. Thankfully, the totem begins to float, but the side that Fitzy is tied to now flips over, and now Fitzy is underwater, and Jack laughs before he jumps off the barnacle, bidding farewell to Davy Jones, and he swims over to the island in the distance. And a while after this, Jack reaches the shore with the totem and Fitzy still tied to it, so he unties Fitzy and props him up before he pulls out the watch again, and after a moment of thought, he pushes the crown back down, and all the time resumes as normal. So let's go back into the book and see what happens here. So in the book, it says, he smoothly pocketed the watch, hiding it just as Fitzwilliam burst to life. "On guard!" the aristocrat shouted, leaping forward, his hand on his sword. "Calm down, mate," Jack said. "What in the name of... Where am I?" Fitzwilliam asked. "What has happened? Jack, the last I saw you were... Where is the barnacle? Where is Jones?" "I don't know from this barnacle and Jones you speak of," Jack said, feigning ignorance. "Do not toy with me, Jack," Fitzwilliam said. "Oh, but it is such fun," Jack responded. Fitzwilliam held his sword to Jack's throat. He looked very threatening, with his wet hair dripping down in front of his livid eyes. Jack threw up his hands in resignation. "You see, Fitzy," Jack said, backing away, "I saved you from that tentacled clutches of the nasty Jones, and tried to keep him from gaining hold of your precious timepiece. Speaking of which, that there watch of yours seems to make time go all funny. Stops it, in fact. Has it always done so?" "I have no idea what you are talking about. You are a madman and speak nonsense," Fitzwilliam replied. "Time does not stop. Ever." "Fitzy, Fitzy, Fitzy. No need to resort to name-calling. Now, with you the owner of a watch with such interesting properties, it begs the question, what other secrets are you keeping from me? Are you a spy for the Royal Navy? A privateer of the East India Trading Company?" Jack asked. Fitzwilliam opened his mouth to reply, but before he could finish, a furious voice rang out over the sea. "Jack Sparrow!" It was the unmistakable voice of Davy Jones. The Dutchman was just offshore, and on board, Jones was clearly very angry. "Oh, brilliant, Jack. There you go again, upsetting the immortals. Really wonderful," Fitzwilliam said, throwing up his arms in frustration. "It didn't seem like you were willing to appease him by forfeiting that there watch of yours, mate. I did you a favor, attempting to help you keep it from him," Jack said. "Well then, I kindly ask you to stop doing me favors, Captain," Fitzwilliam said bitterly. "You won't hear me arguing that," Jack said, dusting the sand off his pants. "Fools! This is not the last you will hear of me." Jones's voice rang out again, interrupting the squabbling duo. Then, as the boys watched, off in the distance, the Flying Dutchman dipped below the waves and was gone. "As angry as I am at you right now," Fitzwilliam said, "I cannot help but ask, as you appear to be the only other living soul in the vicinity, why he did not just come ashore and massacre us." Jack sneered and lifted his nose in the air to indicate that he was not speaking to Fitzwilliam. "Fine, Jack, be like that," Fitzwilliam said. "At least he does not have my watch." Jack cocked an eyebrow. "Oh," Jack said, thinking fast. "Oh, I forgot to tell you that bit. Yes, he does in fact have your watch. He grabbed it back from me before we left the ship. You just don't remember any of it because I pressed the watch and time went all funny directly afterward and you must have forgotten." Jack made a face that looked more like he was trying to convince himself of this lie than Fitzwilliam. "What?" Fitzwilliam railed, surprising Jack by believing the tale. "All this journey to an island while I was somehow unconscious, this angering of Davy Jones, this endless danger you have put us both in, and he has what we were trying to keep from him anyway?" "That's right," Jack said. "Live with it." "I do not want to live with it, and I no longer wish to deal with you, Captain Sparrow. I am foolhardy for not joining the rest of the Barnacle's crew as they escaped your far-from-expert command by joining the crew of the Fleur de la Mort." "Oh, Fitzy, that hurts," Jack said, making a pained expression and holding his hand to his heart. "That hurts me right here. Had you a heart, perhaps it would, but we all know better. However, would that I could truly hurt you, you had best believe I would, but we appear to be the only two men on this island, and we will need to assist one another if we are to escape from it alive. That is an unfortunate but very real truth," Fitzwilliam said. Jack shook his head. "Oh, Fitzy, always so practical. Now, as I am clearly the brains of this outfit, as well as the senior of the two of us, let's say we search for some fresh water, which must be in abundance on an island such as this, with its thick and viney foliage. And why should we not just travel back to the Barnacle? It is moored not far offshore, Fitzwilliam said. I don't think you want to do that, mate. Why ever not? Legend has it that Jones can step on land but once every 10 years. You're safer here on this island, at least for the time being, Jack said. And if this is the stuff of legend, why should I believe such rubbish? Fine, Fitzy, take your chances then, Jack said. Just don't come crying after me when Jones's grand old beastie is wrapping its tentacles around your ankles and pulling you down to a watery grave. Fitzwilliam blanched at the thought of the Kraken attacking him. Then he sped up to fall in step with Jack, who had already advanced 10 yards ahead of the aristocrat. You know that I hate you, Fitzwilliam said. I wouldn't have it any other way, Jack responded. So, one of the best parts of this book, obviously, is the banter between Jack and Fitzy, which, of course, was on full display there. And I love their banter. It's, like, incredible. So funny. But Jack decides to lie to Fitzy and tell him that Jones stole the pocket watch, mainly just to keep the watch for himself and not make Fitzy suspicious of him later. But after this, the two of them press on through the jungle, and at this point, they have been walking for hours. And Fitzy begins to complain to Jack about how they have not yet found fresh water, they are starving, sweating from the humidity, and getting endlessly bitten by mosquitoes. But out of nowhere, their argument is stopped when Jack falls into a hole beneath him. So we're going to go back into the book and see what happens next. So Fitzy runs over to Jack where he fell down in the hole, and Jack says, down here, Jack called out, frustrated. He had fallen into a hole that was about 6 feet wide and twice his height. Thankfully, he had not been killed or even badly hurt, but the hole was certainly deep enough that he could not easily escape. Just give me a moment, Fitzwilliam said desperately, suddenly beginning to imagine a future stranded on this desert island all alone. Jack might be annoying, but Fitzwilliam had learned over time that he also had a gift for getting out of trouble, a gift that Fitzwilliam could not rightly claim for himself. Ah! Jack screamed again. What is it now, Jack? Fitzwilliam said. I told you I'm in the process of figuring. Ah! Jack squealed. Fitzwilliam rushed over to the pit and peered into it. What's wrong? Besides me being stuck in a hole, mate? Jack asked sarcastically. I seem to have some friends down here with me. Jack lifted up a handful of wriggling bugs, similar to the cockroach-like one he had recently swatted on his forehead. They were of many different shapes and sizes. Oh my, Fitzwilliam said, stepping backward in disgust. Then suddenly, the ground fell out from under the aristocrat's feet, too. Jack, a voice came from the hole that Fitzwilliam had tumbled into. What? Jack's voice came, flatly from the other hole. If at that moment an unwitting person had happened to walk past, it would seem as if two gaping holes were talking to one another. I have fallen into a hole of similar size to the one in which you currently find yourself. I discerned as much, Jack said from his hole. Well? Well? What do you mean, well? What are we going to do? You tell me, Fitzy. You were the one who was free to roam about up there, and instead of doing everything in your power to remove me from this awful roach pit, you went and tumbled into another one. Not, mind you, that you hadn't been forewarned by the terrible event that had befallen me. Oh, just moments before. Bravo. Well, there you go with your wells again. Nothing is well right now, nothing at all. If you would have let me finish, Sparrow, Fitzwilliam's voice came booming from his hole. I was attempting to say that perhaps there is some way to scale the walls of our respective pits. Inside his hole, Jack rolled his eyes, and Fitzwilliam, inside his own, imagined Jack doing just that. The boy who fancied himself a captain might have been ingenious when it came to escape plans, but he and his reactions were fairly predictable. Oh, Fitzy, Jack said in a tone that oozed mock admiration. Why did I not think of that clever plan myself? Maybe because it won't work. It was just a thought, Fitzwilliam said. Well, you should stop thinking, Jack said. It seems to do nothing but get us both into trouble. Despite Jack's prediction, Fitzwilliam attempted to grapple the walls of his hole and began to scale up the side. He did not meet with much success, and he yelped as the soft walls crumbled around him. You had to go and try it anyway, didn't you? Jack said from his hole, recognizing the telltale sound of crumbling dirt and loose stones coming from Fitz's ditch. Keep climbing, mate. Soon you'll be buried neck-high in collapsed mud and sand, and then I'll never have to see nor hear from you again. Do you have any other better suggestions, Captain? Fitzwilliam shouted. As a matter of fact, I do, Jack shouted back. Do you mind sharing them? I said I have them. I just have not had very much time to think them up yet. I'm doing that now, Jack said. I thought you said thinking only landed a person in trouble, Fitzwilliam replied. I did not say a person. I said you. For just as it is dangerous for those without feet to attempt to run, it is catastrophic for those without a brain to attempt to think. I, on the other hand, you are mad, Jack. Insane. Complete institutional fodder, Fitzwilliam fumed. The aristocrat slumped into the pit, defeated, but immediately sprang back up again. He had sat down on something long and slithering. Jack may have been bothered by bugs, but Fitzwilliam now found himself faced with snakes. Ugh! Even Madame Minuit's slithering reptiles were not so vile, Fitzwilliam said. Fitzy? Jack called out from his ditch. What is it now? Fitzwilliam asked. I don't think we're going to have to worry about getting ourselves out of here after all, Jack said with a clear mix of enthusiasm and trepidation. And why is that? Fitzwilliam asked. Because, Jack said, I think we're about to be rescued or taken captive. One or the other. Fitzwilliam looked up, puzzled, as moving shadows were cast on the walls at the top of his hole. Then a group of men leaned down and peered into the hole, blocking out most of the sun. They held spears, and their elaborate palm leaf headdresses ruffled in the humid breeze. They shouted something in a language Fitzwilliam did not understand, but then, to his immense surprise, he heard Jack respond to them in whatever tongue they spoke. Hang on, Fitzy, Jack said when he had finished. We're about to get out of here. That said, I'm not entirely certain if we'll be alive or dead next time we see each other. So, after this, Jack and Fitzy are pulled out of their respective holes before the warriors knock them out, and then they begin to carry them through the jungle. And in the book, it says that both of them are tied to two long poles, so I'm assuming they are tied up like how Will Turner was when he was captured by the Pelagostos in Dead Man's Chest. But Jack and Fitzy eventually come to, and they try to figure out where they are being taken. So we're going to go back into the book and see what happens. So Jack says, don't say it. Don't say what? Fitzwilliam asked. Don't say whatever you were going to say. Surely some wise, smart little comment from your precious little mouth. I was just going to suggest that you speak their language. I heard you back when we were trapped in those holes, so why don't you not try some of your famous diplomacy, Fitzwilliam said. I do not speak their language, Jack said, frustrated. Then what was it you were saying to them prior to being lifted from the holes? Fitzwilliam asked. Blasted if I know, Jack said. I was simply throwing together all the various foreign words and phrases I've picked up over the years. Figured they probably understand one or two of them. Well, did they? Fitzwilliam asked. Jack cringed a little. I think I might have offended them. First in Swedish, then in Cantonese, and finally in Bantu. Frustrated with Jack, Fitzwilliam turned to the warriors. Upon closer inspection, Fitzwilliam's brow furrowed. They were certainly odd-looking warriors. While they were dressed in tribal garb, they all appeared very European. Jack and Fitzwilliam had not noticed this before, having been conked on the head at the minute after they were rescued. Where are you taking us? Fitzwilliam asked, hopeful they'd be able to answer, given their European features. When his question met with no reply, he asked again, this time a little bit louder. You can quiet down, mate. They're not deaf. Clearly they're just ignoring you, Jack said. As if to emphasize the point, at that moment the warriors unceremoniously dropped the large poles that held Jack and Fitzwilliam. The boys yelped as they landed on their backs, still tied to their poles, in a muddy clearing. Jack craned his neck as best he could and looked around. They were in a small village of 12 huts arranged in a circle. In the center was a large pile of stones that housed a blazing fire. As if we needed more heat, Jack said, sweating heavily from the tropical weather. This is no mere flame, an unfamiliar voice responded. Jack felt his bonds being loosened as he and Fitzwilliam were freed from the poles and dragged to their feet. In moments, each boy had 4 warriors flanking him, pointing their spears at his neck. Standing in front of Jack was an exceptionally tall man, whose voice they had just heard. He was pale like the others, and his features were also European. A sharp nose, square jaw, and fair hair. This is Chantico, the tall man said, motioning to the fire. I love Chantico, Jack said enthusiastically. Unless it's fried too long in dirty oil, then it's just far too crispy, and my ulcer can't take much of it. Silence! The towering warrior commanded. Jack's mouth snapped shut. Chantico is the patron goddess of our people. She has been worshipped here since man first laid claim to this island centuries ago. Through hurricane winds and floods, her fire has never been extinguished. Well, why don't you and your old flame over here just have a grand old time together? My crewmate and I will then shuffle along, and we can pretend we never met. Savvy? Jack asked. Jack, perhaps it would be better to curb your witty banter right now, Fitzwilliam hissed. Sorry, Jack said. Can't help it. Sirs, Fitzwilliam said, we are glad to hear you speak our language. "We mean you no harm. We have come here in search of nothing but water, and perhaps some sustenance. We will happily be on our way." "You do not understand," the tall man said. "Since the time when this flame was first kindled, our Aztec brothers have been required to sustain her." "Aztec brothers?" Jack said quietly to Fitzwilliam, skeptically examining the pale man from head to toe. "If he has Aztec brothers, I have a mermaid for a sister." "We must feed Chantico so that she may survive," the tall warrior finished. "So what's the problem, mate?" Jack asked. "There's coconuts aplenty here on this island. Or throw the fiery lass some chicken, why don't you? Though I smelled some cooking on the way over here." "That was not chicken," the man said. Jack gulped. "So are you saying that we are to be fed to this flame?" Fitzwilliam asked. "Oh, no, no, no," the tall man responded. "You see, Chantico is the goddess of the family hearth. We are family. This is our hearth. She is our hearth. We would not dare feed her here." Jack looked at Fitzwilliam and traced circles around his temple with his finger to indicate insanity. Fitzwilliam kicked Jack. "But you see," the tall man continued, "she is also the goddess of volcanoes." "Yes, yes," Jack said, rolling his eyes, "and of little lost girls and lonesome wives too, I'm sure. What's your point?" The tall man cackled. "You're a fool, little man," the warrior said. Jack straightened his back. "I am not little, though I do appreciate that you recognize that I am a man. We do not feed Chantico here," the man went on, gesturing to the lapping flames in the center of the small village. "Oh, thank goodness," Fitzwilliam said. "We feed her there," the man pointed up to the top of the mountain peak, which until that moment Jack and Fitzwilliam had failed to notice. Now the last two remaining crew members of the Barnacle squinted their eyes and looked up. There was a lot of mist at the top of this particular mountain, excessive even for a steamy jungle island like this one. Then, without warning, a huge explosive sound rang out, and the earth beneath them shook. The houses of the village rumbled, and Jack, Fitzwilliam, and even some of the warriors lost their balance. Then, from the very top of the mountain, rock and ash shot everywhere, and a huge plume of smoke spewed forth. A monstrous belching sound rang out over the entire island. "Chantico is hungry," the tall warrior said. Then his eyes sparkled as he grinned devilishly. Jack and Fitzwilliam knew where the situation was headed, and it was nowhere good. "Listen, mate," Jack said to the decked-out warrior who had been addressing them. "Not sure what you're looking for exactly, though a new getup might be a good place to start." Jack's voice fell to a whisper as he nodded toward Fitzwilliam. Leading closer to the warrior chief, he continued. "My lordship over there is worth a pretty sixpence piece, if you know what I'm alluding to." The warrior's brow furrowed, and he eyed Jack in confusion. Jack raised his eyebrows and frantically tossed his head in Fitzwilliam's direction. Money, dinero, doubloons, etc. Jack was getting frustrated at the warrior's lack of understanding about where he was going with this. He decided to spell it out for him. "We take the rich fop, put him up for ransom, and split our earnings, savvy?" he finally shouted. "You get some new clothes, some new food for Chantico. I get a new ship and a crew, maybe." Fitzwilliam's face went red with fury and indignation. The warrior seemed just as unhappy with the offer. He spit in Jack's face and shouted something to the villagers, clearly commanding them to take Jack and Fitzwilliam away. "No hard feelings," Jack said to Fitzwilliam as a blindfold was placed over his eyes and the sunlight disappeared. "I am not speaking to you," Fitzwilliam said with his self-assured steadfastness. A moment later, Fitzwilliam, too, was blindfolded, and without further ado, the warriors dragged them away toward the very hungry Chantico. So, Jack and Fitzy are about to be sacrificed to Chantico, who is a goddess that we will find out more of later, specifically in the next book. But if you call what one of the warriors said, he said his Aztec brothers, which is interesting because, as we know, the Aztec people are long gone by this time. So something strange is definitely happening on this island. And these Aztec warriors also apparently have European facial features, which is even stranger. But we pick up here with Jack and Fitzy being taken into an alcove in the volcano. Turning, Jack addressed their captors. "I don't know who you gents think you're fooling," Jack shouted, his voice echoing in the hollow of the cave. "I've never been an Aztec quite as pale as any of you, nor has any member of an Aztec nation ever attempted to feed me to a hungry volcano god. Though I posit, if they had, I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you. In which case my entire point is somewhat moot." One of the warriors shoved Jack forward. Jack's hands and feet were still bound, and he hopped a few times trying to maintain his balance, but eventually toppled to the hard volcanic floor of the cave. Squirming, he turned himself over, and just as he was about to prop himself up and open his mouth to utter another word of protest, wham! Fitzwilliam came crashing down on top of him. Get her off of me, mate. Jack muttered, his voice muffled under Fitzwilliam's weight. The aristocrat muscled his way off Jack. You will pay for this, Fitzwilliam said angrily. The entire Royal Navy will be looking for me. Yeah, Jack said. I was talking to you, buffoon. Buffoon, Jack said, mocking Fitzwilliam's choice of insults. And hey, I thought you weren't talking to me, he added. Oh, shut up, Fitzwilliam said. While some of the warriors had been busy depositing Jack and Fitzwilliam in the cave, a second group had been sealing up the small entrance with large clusters of volcanic rock. Only the top remained to be filled, and as the two boys watched, the final warriors that were left in the cave climbed out of the opening. Hey mates, Jack shouted. Mind leaving just that top portion open for some light and ventilation, like a window of sorts? At that moment, the final rocks were placed in the opening, and Jack and Fitzwilliam were left lying on the floor of the cave, the only light coming from two flickering torches and the few shafts of sunlight that had managed to make their way through the rocks sealing the entrance. The two had landed face to face and looked at each other bitterly as silence filled the room. Why could they not have just thrown us into the volcano and gotten it over with quickly, just as they do in all the old tales? Fitzwilliam finally asked, speaking more to himself than to Jack, but that didn't prevent Jack from answering. Volcano fumes are poisonous, Fitzy, Jack said smugly. So the whole of them would have died with us if they dropped us in the cone, Fitzwilliam mused. Better to leave us here, let the lava flow over the opening they blocked up. Exactly, Jack replied, almost as if he admired the thinking behind the plan. Seal the entrance, seal our fates, Fitzwilliam muttered. Jack rolled his eyes. Even in the hour of your death, you were a dramatist, my liege. Hardly dramatic, Captain. Is this a fine end for one to meet, in your opinion? Fitzwilliam asked. Especially one such as me? I flee from my overbearing father, leave behind a life of privilege, come face to face with the undead on more than one occasion, battle vicious pirates, mermaids, storm kings, and snake women, only to perish tied up in a dark cave with the last person on earth I would wish to perish with. Sounds as though you're living quite vicariously through me, Jack said flatly. After all, I was the one who battled the mermaids, the storm king, and the snake woman, so I would say your assessments are quite inaccurate. As such, you should be honored to perish with me. Oh, who do you think you are fooling, Jack? You who has deluded yourself into believing you have a ship, that you are a captain. Well, I don't think any of that matters much anymore now, eh? Jack pointed out. Oh, it does, Jack Sparrow. It will matter till you and I take our last breaths in this heaven-forsaken death cave here. No, it really doesn't matter, Jack continued. Not with that big beastie about to tear into us. Now, what are you on about? Fitzwilliam asked. There was a loud rumble in the cave. That beastie is what I'm talking about, Jack answered. That rumbling was nothing more than a volcano that will be killing us in a short time from now. No, that was the rumbling tummy of a big, hungry kitty with very sharp teeth who will be dining on us sooner than said volcano and its patron Chantica will be. What are you on about, Jack? Fitzwilliam said, flipping himself over so he and Jack were facing the same direction. And that's when he saw it, a huge, vicious, hungry jaguar. The cat's eyes were flickering menacingly with the reflection of the burning torches. His powerful jaw was stretched open, and his fangs were bared. Then he let out the loudest growl that Jack and Fitzwilliam had ever heard, more accurately, the loudest growl since they had last seen Davy Jones. We are like cake on a platter to this beast, Fitzwilliam said, more calmly than one might expect for someone who was about to be devoured by a jaguar. Jack, on the other hand, was squirming like mad. You will never make your way out of those bonds. You'll do nothing but entice the beast, Jack, Fitzwilliam said. Unless, of course, that is your aim, to hasten your demise. Will you shut your gangplank for one moment? Jack shouted. Fitzwilliam could not see for the darkness and the angle, but Jack was struggling to reach something, and it felt like he almost had it. I just do not see what the use is. Fitzwilliam began. But in that moment, the jaguar growled louder than ever, squatted on its haunches, then pounced toward the two helpless boys. And then something happened. Or more accurately, nothing happened. The beast was frozen in midair. Fitzwilliam had stopped rambling. Only Jack was moving. Despite the fact that his hands were still bound, he had managed to reach the watch, lift the crown, and buy himself some time. In fact, he now had all the time he could possibly need. Thinking quickly, Jack squirmed over to the wall of the cave and propped himself up. When he was finally standing, he hopped over to where the jaguar was suspended midair. Maneuvering his hands, Jack leaned in toward the violent beast and gazed into its deadly maw. Even though Jack knew the jaguar was powerless at this moment, he couldn't stop a shiver of fear as he stared into its mouth, which was full of rows of saber-like fangs and reeked of previous fleshy meals. Once Jack had shaken off the creeps, he leaned in and went to work, sawing away his bonds in the jaguar's teeth. Very quickly, a testament to the sharpness of the cat's teeth. His hands were free. He went to work loosening the ties on his legs and then reopened the passageway to the cave that the warriors had sealed off. It seemed that the warriors had all gone, which, Jack had to admit, was rather smart, as a thick plume of smoke hung overhead and the volcano appeared ready to erupt. But Jack didn't have to worry about that. Every moment was his. After all, he was controlling time. Jack smiled, dusted himself off, and then grabbed a torch of still flame to better see inside the cave. After taking a closer look at the frozen jaguar, he made his way out of the cave. Then he remembered something. I should really take him with me, he said, sounding more than just a little bit inconvenienced. So I love how Jack is just ready to leave Fitzy behind. But out of the goodness of his heart, Jack goes back to help him. And so once he drags Fitzy out of the cave, he looks around and he sees a rope bridge that spans the chasm below. So he drags Fitzy along the bridge until he realizes that the last 20 feet of the bridge's planks have been destroyed. So he thinks for a second about going back, but he's already super exhausted from dragging Fitzy this far, so he pulls out the watch and resumes time, and Fitzy immediately comes back to life. So in the book it says, he took out the watch once more and pushed the crown down, starting the clock and time once more. What? Where? Jack, what have you done to me now? Fitzwilliam asked. Jack quickly hid the watch, knowing Fitzwilliam would want it back. Me? Oh, nothing at all, mate. It's this odd island. Seems to just, Jack waved his hand airily, pick us up and deposit us wherever it wishes with no memory of how it happened. At least we are free of that hungry cat, no? Jack's eyes grew wide with a look that could either mean he was mad with brilliance or just plain mad. You are mad. Mad, 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 Fitzwilliam shouted, obviously not concerned about what particular kind of madness was afflicting Jack. Islands do not just choose to move people around, and in the event that they could decide to do so, they would not have the means to accomplish such a task as they are inanimate. Right, mate. And next you're going to tell me there's no such thing as Davy Jones or Tia Dalma or Father Christmas, Jack said evenly. He had a point. After all the crew had experienced, was it really so unreasonable to believe that an island could have a mind of its own, or the ability to carry out its wishes? Their discussion was cut short by an exceptionally loud rumble. Jack jumped and let out a little squeal when he heard it, automatically thinking it must be the jaguar they left behind, anxious to reclaim its meal. It was only after Jack took a whiff of the awful-smelling air that he realized it was much worse than that. Oh, wonderful, Jack said. Fitzwilliam could not speak. His mouth hung open as he looked up toward the peak of the volcano, which had begun to spew large rocks from its mouth. Careful there, mate, Jack said, grabbing Fitzwilliam by the arm and pulling him from the path of an exceptionally large, semi-molten rock as it plummeted to earth, barely missing the two boys in the bridge. What do you suggest we do now? Fitzwilliam asked, with more than a hint of sarcasm in his voice. What we always do, Jack responded. Run? Right you are, mate, Jack answered. As the two boys retraced their steps on the bridge, the volcano blew its top over their heads. Jack screamed and covered his head to protect himself. It is no use! We are doomed! Fitzwilliam shouted. Just then, a river of lava began spilling down the mountainside. Whether you believe it or not, I am not going to argue with you, Jack said. The molten river was taking down everything in its path. Rocks, soil, trees. Trees! Jack shouted suddenly. What? Fitzwilliam asked. Just follow my lead, Jack said, and don't jump too soon, or too late. As the stream of lava rushed closer and closer, Jack readied himself by squatting as if he were a cat prepared to pounce on his prey. Then, just before the boiling liquid rock had reached them, Jack yelled, "Now!" and the two boys leaped into the top of a particularly full, uprooted tree that was caught in the lava flow, and began to ride it down on the unbelievably steep slope of the mountain. This is lunacy, Fitzwilliam yelled over the roaring rush of lava. Got any better ideas? Jack asked. The tree is burning, Jack, Fitzwilliam yelled. He was right. The flames were quickly engulfing the trunk, and in moments the two boys were surrounded by fire. Look, Jack shouted. They were passing by another tree the lava flow was about to fell. Fitzwilliam nodded vigorously, and the two boys jumped onto the new one. As the lava carried them down the mountain, they watched their previous tree disintegrate into ash. The boys continued their tree jumping. Then suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, Jack saw a glint in the sunlight. As he jumped onto yet another tree, he saw what was causing the glinting. It was a lake, and it looked to be in the path of the lava. If they could make their way over, they would have a safe way out of this exceedingly hot situation. Fitz, bear right, Jack ordered. Confused at first, Fitzwilliam understood what Jack was doing when he looked over and saw the lake. Without a word, the two began to leap from tree to tree, moving closer and closer to the lake. And then, just as they had leaped onto the last possible tree, the lava poured into the cold lake, quickly coagulating. They had made it. As they waded into the lake, they could feel it growing increasingly hotter from the lava flow. Both of them were coughing from the smoke they inhaled and the stench of the burning soil and melting rock as they tried to swim to a safer shore. Then, Jack noticed something else. "Over there!" Jack shouted, pointing to a huge Aztec-style building that was on a higher ground. "Over there!" Jack shouted, pointing to a huge Aztec-style building that was on higher ground. "Judging from how well we were received the first time we encountered people on this island, I sincerely doubt we will find anyone friendly in that place," Fitzwilliam warned. "Friendly? Perhaps not, but it will provide shelter," Jack said, "at least until this whole volcano hoopla has blown over." Fitzwilliam shrugged, clearly beyond the point of caring. He and Jack rushed to the grand entrance of what looked like an Aztec temple. But while most Aztec temples had fallen into ruin since the age of the conquistadors, this one looked almost pristine. Jack opened the huge doors and the two boys entered. "Looks empty enough," Jack said, his eyes darting back and forth across the cavernous room. "Does this grand hall not look familiar?" Fitzwilliam asked. "Of course it looks familiar," Jack snapped. "But why does it look familiar is the question we should be asking ourselves," he mumbled. The walls were gilded, and the marble room was aglow with the light of hundreds of torches. It was all rather overwhelming. "Wonder where everyone is," Jack said. "Probably off giving thanks to good old Chantico for devouring us." "Jack, look at that wall," Fitzwilliam interrupted. "That is even more familiar yet." Jack moved across the floor to take a closer look. On the far wall, illuminated by torches, a large crest was engraved into the stone. He took another step closer, and then he heard a soft but distinct click. This was not good. Suddenly, the floor rolled open under Jack's feet, and he and Fitzwilliam were plunged into a deep and seemingly endless pit. So that is a good question that Fitzy asked there. This building is familiar, and the opening trap floor is something we saw in the first book, The Coming Storm. So I'll let you all ponder that for a moment. But Jack and Fitzy are still alive, and they pull themselves out of the deep pool of what Jack hopes is only dirty water. And once they make it out of the water, Fitzy leans against the cavern wall, and it slides open just like the floor had, and it reveals a newly opened passageway lit by torches. So with no other option, Jack and Fitzy begin to make their way down this path. The two boys carefully followed the length of the corridor. The ground was very muddy, making it difficult to walk. And as neither of them were in any mood for idle chatter, all was silent save for their slushy footsteps. "We have been walking for at least half an hour," Fitzwilliam complained, breaking the silence. "A quarter hour at most," Jack said. "Had I still been in possession of my watch, it would be easy to tell how long we had been traveling along this path," the aristocrat snapped. "Yes, well," Jack said, trying to find a way to move the subject away from the watch he was hiding from Fitzwilliam. Luckily, he was saved from excuses by Fitzwilliam's next words. "I am finding it difficult to move my legs." "I find no humor in your pranks," Jack said. Then he grunted. It felt as though someone was pulling on his legs. Fitzy? What? Were you perhaps speaking just now of an odd sensation in your lower calves, which might feel like something is possibly preventing you from moving forward?" "Genius! I wonder how you knew." "Let's just say I'm not having the easiest time moving either, savvy?" Their eyes met in the torchlight. "Jack, if I dare say it, you seem to be shrinking." Jack looked down toward his feet. He couldn't see them, and he was seeing less and less of his legs as the seconds passed. "Uh-oh," Jack said. "Quicksand!" Fitz's eyes went wide with shock. Jack, however, seemed less worried. In fact, he seemed downright calm. "Our standard plan B, running, would not work in this situation," Jack pointed out. "Luckily for us, I have a backup." Smiling, Jack pulled Fitzwilliam's watch from his pocket. You told me that Jones was now in possession of my watch." Jack shrugged. "Yes, well, I was not being entirely honest." "You were not being honest at all." "Not so. Jones had been in possession of the watch for a brief time, before I secured it once again. So there was a good deal of truth in my so-called untruthful comment." Even by the dim light of the torches, Jack could see Fitzwilliam's face turn beet red. Then the aristocrat launched into a screaming tirade against Jack, and his voice reverberating in the hollow halls of the tunnel. Jack just rolled his eyes and lifted the crown of the watch. Silence. No more trickling of dripping water, no more echoing cavernous sounds, and best of all, no more annoying aristocrat. "Now, to get me out of this sticky situation," Jack said. But when Jack tried to move his legs, his eyes grew wide. He was stuck. It seemed as though stopping time had made this particular situation worse. The quicksand had taken the consistency of cement without the passage of time there to move it along. Jack sighed and started the watch ticking again. The corridor immediately filled with the sound of Fitzwilliam screaming. As before, it was clear he had not even realized that there had been a period during which time stood still. "Are you done?" Jack said. Fitzwilliam tried to kick in frustration, but as he couldn't move his legs, he only succeeded in straining a muscle in his thigh. "Ow!" he screamed, rubbing his leg and scowling indignantly at Jack. Jack ignored Fitzwilliam's fit of rage. When the other boy was done yelping, Jack sighed deeply. "Fitzy, now is not the time for dramatics, as I have a question of the most serious nature to pose. Has your watch, in fact, always done this?" "Done what?" Fitzwilliam shouted bitterly. "This stopping time thing? I told you before, I have no bloody idea what you're on about, Sparrow." "Ahem." Jack cleared his throat. "Allow me to exhibit its strange and wonderful powers to you." Jack once again lifted the crown from the watch and let out a laugh as Fitzwilliam's frozen expression, arms crossed, a twisted mix of angst, rage, and curiosity on his face. Reaching out as far as he could, he began to write his finger on the loose dirt path that lined the tunnel. So in the book, it shows what Jack wrote into the dirt, which is, "I wrote this sentence while time was going all funny, savvy?" And it even shows it in like a garbled and sloppy handwriting, which is a cool little touch. But back to this book. Then Jack started the watch running again. Fitzwilliam did not notice what Jack had done right away. That is, until Jack opened his eyes wide and nodded his head toward the ground. Upon seeing the note, Fitzwilliam's jaw dropped. "The watch! It must have been charmed at some point, after it was taken from me," Fitzwilliam sputtered. "But how? And by whom? And how did it wind up at a pawn shop in New Orleans?" Before Jack and Fitzwilliam could take their conversation any further, a wet sound, like a carriage being drawn through slush by multiple horses, came from the far end of the corridor. And from that same direction, a strong light began to illuminate the tunnel, casting shadows of what looked like some very tall men up on the wall. "Quick," Fitzwilliam said, "use the watch." And without thinking, Fitz leaned over and grabbed the timepiece from Jack. The two boys fought for control of it. With a sudden jerk, it wasn't clear who pulled hardest. The watch flew from the boys' hands and dropped into the quicksand. Fitzwilliam swallowed hard. Jack tilted his head and cocked an eyebrow as if to say, "Now look what you've done." And all the while, as the boys and the watch kept sinking, the figures at the end of the tunnel grew ever closer. So the people coming toward them end up being more of the Aztec warriors they encountered earlier. And now, like I said before, these are definitely not Aztec people. They are wearing Aztec clothing, but they're definitely European. Which then begs the question, why are they dressed like this? Well, that is a question we will answer very soon, in fact. But the leader they had seen earlier is with this group of warriors, and he is angry that they escaped from Chantico. And while the leader says he'd rather let them die in the quicksand, he agrees with Jack when he asks, now what would be the fun in that? So the leader orders his men to throw Jack and Fitzwilliam some rope in order to pull them out. The warriors then pull Fitzy out pretty quickly, and then they begin to try and pull Jack out. But Jack is focused on trying to get the watch before it sinks all the way into the quicksand. So he starts resisting being pulled out of the sand as he's trying to make sure he can grab the watch as well. But right as the warriors pull Jack out, he's able to catch his boot in the chain of the pocket watch, which pulls it out along with him. And now they're both free. The leader commands his men to take Jack and Fitzy to the throne room, and Jack thinks that the throne room belongs to the leader of the warriors, but he specifically says, "The throne is not mine." And so the whole time Jack and Fitzy are being marched down this passage, Jack still has the pocket watch around his ankle. But thankfully, no one hears the clanking with all the footsteps making sound in the corridor. Then they emerge into a new room, and Jack and Fitzy have their hands bound together again before they are thrown into a cage. And then they are surprised that this cage begins to rise up to a chamber above them. So they're in a more primitive version of an elevator. And once they reach the top chamber, the cage is opened by two women who Jack smiles and winks at before they keep walking into the throne room. And a new voice commands the women to bring Jack and Fitzy forward. So let's find out what happens next and who this mysterious man is. So the new mysterious voice says, "Bring them forward," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. The women grabbed Jack and Fitzwilliam by their bound hands. The one Jack was flirting with was quick to escort him, and walked them toward the man on the throne. He cut a very striking, not to mention intimidating figure. His black hair was slicked down over his left eye. He wore a bandana, and his fingers, neck, and ears were adorned with jewels. His eyes were lined with kohl, and his teeth had been frightfully shaved into points, so it looked as though he had held a mouth of fangs. From his getup, this man appeared to be a pirate, and a dangerous one at that, what with the legions of warriors on the island to protect him. "Kneel," the pirate said when the boys were in front of him. "No offense, mate, but Jack Sparrow kneels for no—" But before Jack could finish, the cute girl, still smiling sheepishly, kicked Jack in the back of his knees, and he fell to the ground before the fearsome pirate. Fitzwilliam, who had also been resisting, was taken down in a similar fashion by his own escort. "I like a girl who packs a punch," Jack said, half smiling, half agonizing. "We really do need to talk." "Leave us," the pirate told the girls. "But first, sever their ties so that when I kill them, they can't say I didn't play fair." The girls bowed, whipped out daggers, and swiftly cut the ties that bound Jack and Fitzwilliam. Jack shook his hands free and blew his girl a kiss. She smiled and then retreated back to the far end of the chamber along with her cohort. For a brief second, as the girls retreated and the pirate looked on, Jack thought he might be able to bend down and grab the watch, which was still wrapped around his boot. But he did not end up having enough time, for the frightening pirate stood up, his sword drawn. Jack would have to wait for the right moment before snagging the watch. "So, you were able to defeat the goddess Chantico," the vile man hissed. "Or perhaps she freed you herself. After all, the heathen gods have no love lost for me. If you ask me, I think they're just jealous." The pirate was now leaning in close to Jack and Fitzwilliam, his rotten teeth reeking in his foul mouth. "But just because you were able to free yourselves from a goddess," he continued, "does not mean you'll be able to escape me. I, who am more powerful than a god. Boys, prepare to meet your maker at the hands of Stone-Eyed Sam and his all-powerful weapon, the Sword of Cortez." Jack and Fitzwilliam stood before the vicious pirate, a pirate who should not have been there at all, in a state of shock. "Sorry, mate, but you can't be Stone-Eyed Sam," Jack said. "He's dead. We saw his skeleton, and that's not the Sword of Cortez in your hand. The sword, if you must know, even though I probably should not be telling you such classified information, is with the powerful mystic Tiadama for safekeeping." The pirate smirked, pointed his sword at the ceiling, and turned a huge stalactite into a slithering boa constrictor. "Oh," Jack said, recognizing the sword's power. "Yeah, that's the Sword of Cortez, all right. I am glad you have come to realize the truth. You are lucky to have survived my small army. All good sailors, charmed by the sword into believing they are Aztec warriors, and that I am a god. I would do the same to you, turn you into my servants, were you more fit." Jack winced at this insult. "Now prepare to meet your fate," Stone-Eyed Sam shouted. Then he lunged at the boys, the sword glowing powerfully with sparks and flames. "Yikes!" Jack said, jumping away quickly. At that very moment, Fitzwilliam noticed the watch dangling from Jack's boot. "Jack, the watch!" Jack was so flustered with all this Stone-Eyed Sam business that he had all but forgotten that he had retrieved the watch. Before he could do anything, Fitzwilliam lunged for the timepiece and tried to grab its chain. But there was no way Jack was about to let go of the watch and its power. Reaching down, he closed his fingers on the chain and held it tightly. Then, as a confused Stone-Eyed Sam looked on, the two boys tugged at the timepiece. Finally, Jack managed to lift the crown and everything went still, except for Jack, and this time, Fitzwilliam. "You were not kidding then," Fitzwilliam says. "It stops time? Literally?" "No, I was not kidding then," Jack said. "I dare say that I am somewhat confused by the goings-on here," Fitzwilliam said. "What's not clear to you, mate?" Jack said. "Now we know why this island and the temple look familiar to us. We've even been down that booby-trapped floor before. We're in Stone-Eyed Sam's pirate kingdom on Isla Escalatica, and we've somehow here before he lost all his powerful sword and fell from power." "Right, Jack. That makes so much sense. You said yourself that Sam was dead. We saw his remains. We delivered the sword to Tiadama ourselves," Fitzwilliam argued. "These points all raise questions. You shouldn't open your mouth unless you have answers too, savvy?" "I did notice Sam's mark in that grand hall. I just didn't think too much of it." "He could have left his mark in a lot of places," Fitzwilliam admitted. "But he had been dead for years by the time we'd first visited his island. His kingdom was in ruins. If this is the same place, does it mean he has been resurrected? And that his city has somehow risen from the ashes as well?" Jack and Fitzwilliam looked back at the terrifying but frozen pirate. His fang-like teeth were bared, and a huge X of a scar that marked his face was red with rage. Turning from the pirate, Jack looked down at the watch again. "I gather that we're both still moving despite time having stopped, because you were touching the watch chain when I lifted the crown out and stopped it," Jack said. "Since we both have all the time in the world, let's try to find our way out of this place." Now that Jack and Fitzwilliam knew for certain they had been in this temple before, they looked around eagerly, hoping to see something that would guide them out. But it wasn't that easy. The last time Jack and Fitzwilliam had been in this throne room, it had been a dilapidated mess. There had been none of the splendor that possessed here and now. Suddenly, Jack remembered there had been an opening right over Sam's throne. He had always thought it was there because the throne room had fallen into disrepair, but with all the trapdoors and hidden passageways, he wondered if Sam had put an escape hatch there intentionally. Nodding at Fitz to follow, Jack made his way over to the throne. Pulling himself up, Jack stood on top of it. Sure enough, there was a rope ladder leading up to the roof of the chamber, and beyond, Jack could see sunlight. Jack motioned to Fitzwilliam. "Ladies first," Jack said, smiling. Fitzwilliam sneered but did not forfeit the opportunity to escape the terrifying chamber. Shimmying up quickly, he disappeared from sight. Once again, the room was quiet, save for Jack's breathing. Fitzwilliam made not a peep. "Mighty quiet up there, mate," Jack pointed out as he climbed the ladder himself. When he got to the top, he realized just why Fitzwilliam had been speechless. Above them, filling the sky, still as everything else in the world, were what looked like huge birds. Bigger and stranger than any birds Jack had ever seen. They were leathery, not feathered, with huge beaks and their wings stretched for what looked like 50 feet. "Wow, lots of birds. Flying north for the summer, you think?" Jack asked. "Jack," Fitzwilliam answered, "these are pterodactyls. They were largely thought to be a thing of legend, but I have a tutor who claims to have uncovered the bones of just such an animal. He also claims that they went extinct millions of years ago. Jack, this watch, I don't think it's just stopping time. It's making it go all funny," Jack finished for Fitzwilliam. "That certainly explains why Stone-Eyed Sam's kingdom is still intact, and why the barnacle's skiff was missing and there was a totem pole in its place. The skiff must have been carved from the totem pole, and when I used the watch, it reverted to that state." "What do you propose we do now?" Fitzwilliam asked sincerely for once. "For someone who loves to incessantly mock my status as captain, you certainly do ask a lot of advice of me," Jack snarled. "Nevertheless, we will try to make our way back to the barnacle, and see if there's some way to sail away from this horrid island again." So a lot just happened there, so let's break it all down. Stone-Eyed Sam is alive and well, and he has with him the Sword of Cortez. And not just that, but pterodactyls are flying around the island. So as Jack realized, the pocket watch not only stops time, but it starts to spin everything out of order when you use it. So Jack and Fitzy are in a pretty precarious situation here. And they end up escaping from Stone-Eyed Sam's temple, and they make their way through the jungle to the shore. And they see the barnacle is still out there where it had been left earlier, but right next to it is the Flying Dutchman. And Davy Jones is obviously waiting for Jack and Fitzy to return. So let's go into the book one more time and see how all this ends. So let us take stock. We have Jones in the water, extinct flying beasts in the sky overhead, and Stone-Eyed Sam and the powerfully evil Sword of Cortez on the land behind us. And we already know what is under our feet: booby traps and sand pits. I ask again, what do we do now? Fitzwilliam said. "We stay here," Jack said proudly. "We fight, and once we defeat Sammy and his strange mock Aztecs, we make our way onto the barnacle and give it our best shot against Jones." "Why not just find our skiff and sail to another island?" Fitzwilliam asked. "Oh, Fitzy," Jack said, "you obviously don't remember the last time we were here. This island is in the middle of nowhere. We'd never make it to another island before we starved to death or died of exhaustion, and if we're caught out at sea, it's Jones' locker for us both." The odds seemed insurmountable, but Fitzwilliam realized there was likely no other way out of this situation. The only thing the boys had in their favor was their watch, and that was very likely what had gotten them into this mess in the first place. This would probably be the trickiest, possibly deadliest, fight of their lives. "Ready?" Jack said. "As I will ever be," Fitzwilliam said. The boys nodded to one another, and with a steely resolve, they set off to win back their lives, their boat, and most important of all, their freedom. And that is the end of Book 8, The Timekeeper. This one ends on a pretty exciting cliffhanger, which leads right into the 9th book of the Young Jack Sparrow series, which is called Dance of the Hours. And I hope you'll join me next time for that book, because it is another really good one, and the ending of that book is one you are not going to want to miss. If you've read it before, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And I still cannot believe we have hit 40 episodes of the podcast. That's seriously mind-blowing, and it is all thanks to your support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you've rated or reviewed the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on, thank you as well. I'm truly, truly so grateful for everything this podcast has done for me and for helping me connect with all of you awesome Pirates of the Caribbean fans. And the fact that it's been 2 years already just blows my mind. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, consider buying some merch for the podcast, which is now available. The next year of the podcast is going to be very exciting. So thank you all once again. I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If I could say thank you 1,000 times, I would, because this experience of doing this podcast has been incredible. So thank you, and I will see you all next time for Book 9, Dance of the Hours. Take care. Podcast of the Caribbean is in no way affiliated with Disney. If you want to send me an email or a question, you can send it over to podcastofthecaribbean@gmail.com. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram and Threads at Podcast of the Caribbean, and over on Twitter/X at PodcastPOTC. I post fun content and trivia, so make sure to check those platforms out. Be sure to keep a weather eye on the horizon, and always remember, dead men tell no tales.